We can see here, this is an ancient picture of Nimrod, that all the sun gods from every region might have had different names, but they can all be traced back to the original sun god, Baal, aka Nimrod. Look at this picture of him with a long beard. You can begin to see where I'm going to go next as we begin to discover what the December 25th holiday, how it gets connected to Santa Claus himself. Some of the different names that Baal had was this. In Persia, it was Mithras. You can do a study yourself on this. This is incredibly fascinating. If you study the pagan cultic worship of Mithras, you're going to see tremendous amount of connections to some of the things that we do here in Christianity. This is 500 years before the birth of Jesus, before Yeshua. It was called the birth of the unconquerable sun, was Mithras. Osiris and Horus and Ra in Egypt. He was called Attis of Rome. And to celebrate their birthdays, the Romans had a great feast called the Feast of Saturnalia. Guess how long it was? 12 days. That's right, which is where we get the 12 days of Christmas from, is right from the Feast of Saturnalia, which is over the Feast of the winter solstice, or the time of the winter solstice. And guess what the Chaldeans called this day? Today we call it Christmas, but back then the Chaldeans called it Yule Day. Do you know what the word Yule literally means? It means the day of the infant. And they were certainly not talking about Jesus. They were talking about Tammuz, who was the Son of God, who would one day come back and save them from the world. You see, Satan can't do anything else but take the truth, twist it, and get people to believe a lie. And that's what he did with the story of the birth and the death of our Lord, is he replicated that in paganism. And so at some point his plan was to take the paganism and mix it into Christianity. And whenever you mix holy with the profane, the scriptures call that unholy. Yahweh does not accept anything that's unholy. It must be clean. It must be set apart and holy. Kadosh in Hebrew. So does this sound familiar? Let's move to this character called Odin, because this is where we're going to get into a little bit more detail of our holiday, is where some of these symbols come from. Along with the celebration of the sun gods, the Scandinavians also worshiped this god called Odin. He was the god of intoxicating drink, ecstasy, as well as the god of death. And because of the Feast of Saturnalia dealing with all those things, he naturally became the most popular god of the Feast of Saturnalia, which was a sun god, which we can trace all the way back to Baal himself. Guess who this character became? Look at him very carefully. What does he look like? The colors are wrong, but this guy became Santa Claus. That's right. Odin, or Woden, was the god of wisdom, magic, and occult knowledge, runes, poetry, and war. His name meant the inspired one. And you're going to begin to see, as we move through these slides, you're going to see that Santa Claus, or Odin, is awfully familiar to Jesus, or Yeshua, which means salvation. We're going to see a god Odin who saves, and we're going to see another one called Yeshua who saves. Now, I want you to pay attention to some of the characteristics as we go through Odin, because it's shocking to see the similarities and how Satan is trying to masquerade as an angel of light, as we know from the scriptures. He was a tall, old man that had a long white beard and carried a spear, or a crozier. Remember when we went through the crozier, the serpent crozier? Whoever holds a serpent crozier is connected to the power behind that serpent crozier, which is the serpent himself. Let's continue. He traveled around the world on a white horse that had 8 legs, which was in ancient tradition the number of transportation. This is where the 8 reindeer came from. Now you might say, Jim, there's 9. Originally, there was 8. Rudolph was added in modern times. There was 8 reindeer, and it comes from that white horse that Odin traveled around on that had the 8 legs. You can look up all of this stuff as very common knowledge on the internet, in encyclopedias. You can see Odin and all the reference material that goes with it. And virtually every version of Claus, he carried along behind him a dark helper. These became the elves, So virtually every single version of Claus, there was a dark helper. If you look carefully in that picture, you can see that kind of little demon guy with the long red tongue that comes out of him. these were called Krampuses. The Krampus, or the dark helpers, followed along, and if the children weren't good, they would beat the children, okay? And so you had the good guy, St. Nicholas, who eventually would become St. Nicholas, the Odin, who would come and he would give you gifts if you were good, and if you weren't, then the blackjacks, or the dark helpers, they would be the ones that would institute the discipline to the children, and we're going to see that. So these Krampuses, which ended up being Santa's elves, according to legend, the Krampus accompanies St. Nicholas during the Christmas season, warning and punishing the bad children, in contrast to St. Nicholas, who gives gifts to good children. That comes from Wikipedia. Here's another picture of Krampus and Santa's elves. You can see the picture on your right is that you have, it's almost like a witch's broom, where the children, the naughty children, are being carried away by a Krampus, which is a combination of a human and a goat, okay? And you see this all throughout history, is a human that's mixed with a goat. And I have a teaching on the Nephilim, or the sons of God, where I kind of go through this, but in a nutshell, on the holiday called Yom Kippur in the Bible, where once a year the high priest went into the Holy of Holies to make a sacrifice, there were two goats that were offered. One was called the La Adonai goat, and that goat was offered to Yahweh, as to Adonai. And the other goat was called the La Azazel goat, and that goat was taken off into the wilderness, and it was pushed over a cliff. And the La Azazel goat was where they took the hands of the high priest, and they would incorporate all the sins of Israel onto the head of this goat, and then send it off into wilderness to Azazel. Now, Azazel was a man-goat god, okay, in ancient mythology. And so it was said that it was Azazel who caused man to sin, and so all of the sins of mankind for that year of the Israelites would be placed on the head of the Azazel goat. And this is what we see transferred all the way down into another form of Santa's helper is actually Azazel, if you will, or the Krampus is what they call it today. And the picture on the left you can see is actually a modern day picture of a festival, a Christmas festival in Germany, where they continue to use this celebration, and they bring out Krampus, or Santa's helpers. This is a modern day picture here. As crazy as this is for us American Christians to believe that this still goes on today, this is a picture of St. Nicholas and his demons, his Krampus, are still celebrated in Austria, Hungary, Germany, Italy, and all over the world. And so what we're going to show you right now is an actual clip, or a short movie of a montage of different videos that we've discovered of where they still make this celebration, still celebrate this all around the world, where they literally glorify the demonic part of Christmas and St. Nicholas and these dark helpers. I know, I apologize, it just keeps getting worse, doesn't it? And if that wasn't enough, there are some scholars that believe that the actual song Jingle Bells came from the Krampus bells that were in existence for a long time before that song was ever written, that every time you saw St. Nicholas, he was accompanied by the bells of Christmas, if you will, from his elves. They used to have bells that would hang from their necks and as you heard in the video, they would you would hear the bells as they announced themselves into the next town that they were going into. And some believe that that's actually where the term the Christmas bells, or the bells of Christmas, or jingle bells came from. Now we're going to move into discovering exactly where Santa Claus came from. So Odin, how did Odin become Santa Claus? Well, here's the rendition or the evolution of Odin becoming Santa Claus. By the 1500s in Holland, there he became Sinterklaas. Okay, so St. Nicholas turned into Sinterklaas, a kind and wise old man with a white beard, white dress, red cloak, a crozier, and he rode on the skies and the roofs of the houses on his white horse, accompanied by his blackjacks, which were the Krampus that we just saw, leaving gifts for people under his sacred tree, the fir tree. He would visit you on his birthday, December 25th, of course, and give you gifts if you've been good, or if you've been bad, his blackjacks would beat you. And it's amazing to me that these stories find themselves in modern Christmas traditions even today. 2,000 and 3,000-year-old pagan traditions find themselves, and now we smile about these traditions. The most famous phrase that Santa Claus ever says is what? Ho, ho, ho. But do we ever stop for just a moment to think, where did that come from? Well, if you go back in history, you begin to find where that phrase actually originated from, and here's where it originated from. In the history of Hobgoblin, the author Alan W. Wright reveals Robin itself was a medieval nickname for the devil, and Robin's trademark laugh is ho, ho, ho. Back in the 1600s, Robin Goodfellow played the devil in many, many plays, which plays obviously back then were incredibly important. They didn't have theaters or movies today. So the theater and plays were an integral part of society back then. And so before the devil would ever come on stage, he would announce himself by saying, ho, ho, ho. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, where the ho, ho, ho comes from with Santa Claus. By the year 1700, a Dutchman immigrated to North America, brought his Sinterklaas with him. The English dialect was then changed to Santa Claus. In 1930, a designer for the Coca-Cola Company was trying to get people in the wintertime to buy their drink. So they took their company colors of red and white, borrowed the Sinterklaas story, changed a few things, and out came the modern Santa Claus, complete with reindeer and elves. So that 1930 designer borrowed a picture from I think it was the 1800s, and modernized it, added the colors, and out came the Coca-Cola Santa Claus that we see today, complete with the long white beard and chubby cheeks and the red and white suit. In the 1970s, let's continue. The Second Vatican Council, listen to this, formally stated that no Roman Catholic bishop by the name of Nicholas ever existed. They downgraded St. Nicholas. They took away his sainthood because there was evidence that brought forth to the Vatican that it was possible that he never even existed, along with many other saints. Vatican II further confessed that the legends attributed to this saint had no Christian origin and probably came from pagan traditions itself. Okay? And so we're seeing that St. Nicholas most likely was a made-up saint that was connected to sun god or Odin, that ended up being Odin. They needed to Christianize it, made a saint out of him. Eventually the colors got changed. You see the elves come into the picture, and they go from being evil to little cute guys that make toys. That's all American modernization of a very satanic, evil, pagan holiday and origins that go all the way back to the garden itself and its deception. Look here, the World Book Encyclopedia says this: the belief that Santa enters the house through the chimney developed from an old Norse legend. The Norse believed that the goddess Hertha appeared in the fireplace and brought good luck to the home. That's actually where the word hearth comes from. It comes from Hertha, which was the goddess of the Norse. And so we see that right out of the World Book Encyclopedia, that Santa comes down the chimney has nothing to do with anything that is good, has everything to do with a God that came through fire. And ladies and gentlemen, I only know one God that goes through fire, and that is Satan himself, that will be eventually thrown in.